Hello and welcome to another episode of October Surprise, a podcast created for citizens by citizens in Pennsylvania's new 16th Congressional District. I'm Jim Roddy, a lifelong resident of Northwest Pennsylvania and your host for today's podcast. Before we give some background on the podcast, we started to receive some feedback on what we're doing here, and I can't thank folks enough for the kind comments, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's via email, and all our subscribers on iTunes. So thank you very much for your support of the podcast. It's very encouraging, and we're going to keep moving forward throughout the month of October. So if you haven't listened before, here's a little bit of background. October Surprise features a series of interviews designed to educate listeners in Erie, Crawford, Mercer, Lawrence, and Butler Counties on key issues that face both our district and our two congressional candidates, incumbent Mike Kelly and challenger Ron DiNicola. On each podcast, we'll also discuss ethical leadership, which unfortunately is in rare supply in Washington, D.C. in 2018. We'll do a lot of talking today and throughout the month of October on this podcast, but our ultimate goal is action. For democracy to work, you have to participate. We can't be bystanders. So at a minimum, that means being an informed voter. You can help by sharing episodes of October Surprise with your family and at least one or two friends, those on-the-fence voters who live in our district. The ultimate action is voting on Election Day. Let's surprise the special interest groups, the political action committees, and the big money when we take back our district on Tuesday, November 6th, and once again, put people first. Finally, I'm not a political veteran or a campaign strategist, so I don't have all the answers. But together, we're going to learn what's happening in our district by talking with elected officials, grassroots leaders, and extraordinary citizens from PA 16 in each episode. Our special guest today is Judy Hines. She has deep roots in western Pennsylvania. She's a Mercer County native, a graduate of Mercer High School, and also of Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And she received a master's degree at Slippery Rock and also a master's degree at Boise State. She's been an educator for nearly 4 decades, teaching at Air Force bases in Idaho and the Philippines. She's best known around these parts for her work at the Lakeview Area School District, where she taught physical education and health for 35 and a half years before retiring. She's done a lot of volunteer work in our community as well. She's a member of the League of Women Voters in Mercer County, and she's also worked with Lakeview's Behavioral Health Program and volunteered with the Mercer County Behavioral Health Commission as a child advocate. Judy, thanks for your time today. Welcome to October Surprise.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's great to be here. So today we're going to discuss 2 topics, and education is one of them. Obviously, you're very much qualified with your experience to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about farmers in northwest Pennsylvania and western Pennsylvania. So you've engaged with several Mercer area farmers this summer. What are their challenges in 2018? What are the things that they're telling you that they're facing today?
Well, there are many, many challenges for them. I taught in a very rural school district. The majority of my students and their parents were farmers. They had beautiful large farms and small farms in the area. A lot of them, that's exactly what they wanted to do, continue working in the family farm. And the challenge that they have now is not unfamiliar to them, because local farmers in our area are used to facing challenges. They've grown accustomed to finding new ways to survive and ways to reduce costs to remain competitive with the larger farms and agribusinesses. Sadly, and recently, local farmers' resourcefulness to discover new ways to survive have been running on empty. They simply cannot find keys to survival anymore. And consequently, many have had to quit or are considering quitting. Recently I went to, they have an auction. They have a milk auction in the summer with the 4-Hers. And when I went to the auction, many of my students talked to me about they have to find other jobs. They want to continue with their families, but they can with their family farms, but they cannot afford it. So they have many challenges. A lot of them are the gas prices. I have a family that's very, very dear to me. I had all of their sons in school. They were one of the largest farmers and landowners in Mercer County. Because of gas prices, it is very, very difficult to run their equipment. And then there was the one son came down with a terrible illness that cut a worker, and then the dad had some health problems. They've had to sell their farm. Mm. It was heartbreaking to talk to at the Stoneboro Fair. That's our county fair, the largest fair we have in our county. And I sat and talked to the mom, and she was in tears. Her husband has been hospitalized, and they've lost their farm.
Mm. That's awful. So you're saying gas prices are impacting them. I mean, there's a lot of, like you said, just general factors that make it difficult to compete against some of those factory farms, as they're called sometimes. So gas prices, healthcare, tariffs, are those having an impact as well? The recent tariffs that have been implemented, and how so?
Well, there's the current administration, and I'm speaking of the president at this point in time, but sad to say, Mike Kelly, who's our congressman, also believes in these tariffs. And the approach to global economics is nothing short of a war on our farmers. The American farmer has been feeding more and more people in the world and has been producing more and more agricultural commodities than ever before in history. They produce far more than can be used domestically. And therefore, prices have been dependent upon export. So there's the belief that tariffs will boost the American economy. But now many countries that used to import agricultural commodities from the U.S. are turning to other countries to buy their grains, beef, and dairy products, and pork. And the general policy of isolationism, like they're trying to isolate us, and we're beyond that now. We're global. And this has led to an overstock in the U.S. and prices that don't even meet the costs of production. Many other competitive countries can produce goods cheaper, and they're using different types of farming methods, and they're still using pesticides and herbicides that the U.S. has outlawed decades ago, and that was good because it kept our food safe and our supply safe, and it protected our environment. But it's a catch-22 for us. And, the subsidies alone, the production costs are so high that the subsidies alone cannot help our local farmers survive.
Yeah. Yeah, and is it just like in anything, if you buy something on a regular basis somewhere and the price starts going up, it's going to make you consider going elsewhere, even if it's convenient for you to get it at that place that you've always been. If they're going to raise the price enough, you might drive out of your way to go somewhere different. So it sounds like that's what the tariffs are doing.
I mean, in our grocery stores around here, we can just go to any of our small grocery stores, and we still have some very small grocery stores in our area, especially Sandy Lake and Stoneboro area, which is more rural. There's still a very small grocery store owned by a family. And you go in there, and to buying local from our farmers is sometimes 3 times above the cost of what just buying from other countries.
Yeah.
So why is buying local that much more expensive? We should be making that less so that our farmers could benefit.
Right, as opposed to the other direction. So I've lived in Erie, Mill Creek, and Fairview in Erie County. I'm a lifelong white-collar employee, so I am not in touch with our local farming community. I mean, outside of consuming what they produce, what I buy up here at Wegmans or Giant Eagle or the co-op here in Erie. Can you paint a picture for us, for those like me who aren't in touch as much with the farming community? How important is farming to all of our counties, Erie, Crawford, Lawrence, Mercer, and Butler counties? If family farms here struggle and fail, what's the impact on all of us?
Oh, my. Well, number one, we have a rich history in all of those counties you just mentioned. It includes the whole 16th district. A rich history of farmers and farming and generational farms. That's what this area was made of. And the impact on what's happening, you can just see the looks on the faces of my former students who their whole life, they were 4-H'ers. This is what their grandparents had, their great-grandparents. This farm belongs to them. And now they're losing that and having to look elsewhere for jobs, and then not being able to find them. If they move to something else in industry, we're also suffering with industry here in this 16th district. So they're moving out of a state that they love. On top of that, it brings tourism to this area. Many people come from the Pittsburgh area to summer because of the beautiful land, the rolling hills, and the farms. It's beautiful to drive down our roads and see fields and fields of corn, fields and fields of hay, fields and fields of soybeans. People love it. When you talk to people, many of them come to the Jamestown area to camp. Many of them come to Mercer County. We have many campgrounds, and what they speak of is they love to come out to the country to see the beauty that is offered by our farms. So there is a big impact, not only financially on the families and a crushing burden on them having to lose something that is generational, but it's an impact on our tourism.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talked about, there is the financial impact, and that's what I thought was going to be what you were going to only talk about. But that pride is a major thing where folks have that history in it. And if folks don't believe that there's a rich history, Northeast High School, which is up here in Erie County, their nickname is the Grape Pickers. It is something that folks definitely take pride in.
I will say this. This is so interesting that you said this, and this brings a memory to me. I go to the farm shows in Harrisburg, and 2 years ago, I was at the farm show, and there was this young lady from the Grape Pickers, and she was the Grape Princess. Mm-hmm. They come in with in the farm show, they have their banners on what produce or what dairy farm or whatever they are representing. And she was the Grape Princess, and she was from that school.
Yeah.
And it was delightful to talk to her, and the pride she held. So I don't think people understand that pride, that sense of history, that this is in their fiber. This is what their family was made of. This is what they want to continue on. And it's very sad to watch that. In our area, there's certain names that when you go to the 4-H shows. Those families are always going to be there showing their pigs, their dairy cows, their beef cows, whatever. And what hit me at this last 4-H show that I went to is when the young man showed his dairy cow and then came out and he said, Mrs. Hines, I'm going to have to leave this. I can't do this. I can't do what my father taught me to do and what I love.
Yeah, it's just devastating. End of a tradition. Yeah. So what can be done? I guess if you can answer that question in terms of, is this just an inevitable thing? Like there's nothing the government can do to save newspapers. Like there's digital media, and that's the way that life is going. I guess if it just, what did you mention Mike Kelly? Where do you see him falling short? And then what can be done to overcome these challenges? What would you like to see our next congressman do? So if you can answer those two questions, I'd appreciate it.
Well, the isolationism needs to stop. They need to realize that farmers are global and that our farmers here, their job is to feed our counties, to feed Pennsylvania, but now their job is become to feed the world. So this tariff is nothing more than a war on farmers. They need to change that. They need to understand also that our farmers are dependent on their machinery, and a lot of these imports for parts from machinery, when the machines wear out, they need to be replaced. And farmers use machines that are built all over the entire globe. Mm-hmm. It won't be long before the warehoused parts are depleted. The cost of replacement will be higher, and the tariffs on steel will be an integral factor for our local farmers to remain in business.
Yeah.
So it is so interconnected that steel and farming, people may not connect the dots between those two,
right?
But it is. The same with gas. The same with the one farm family that I talked about that lost their farm, the largest landowners in Mercer County. A part of it was the cost of gasoline. And here we are, and these farmers understand the importance of resource of the land and what it gives back. The drillers are coming in and taking our resource, a resource that belongs to every single person in Pennsylvania, every single person in Mercer County. And what are they giving back? Nothing.
No.
They need to pay a fee for what they're taking from us. When those farmers take their things to market, they have to, they're expecting a price from that. But they pay with labor and pay with taxes on what they take to market. These drillers are coming in and taking everything scot-free and giving nothing back. If we could receive a fee for the extraction that they are taking, the amount of money that could help our farmers would be monumental in saving our farms. Another thing I feel is the next person that wins this congressional seat, they need to advocate for tearing down economic trade walls, not build, and they need to advocate for tearing down the economic and trade walls.
Yeah.
And don't build new ones.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be the open flow.
Open.
Yeah, those are the customers, and if you're starting to change the rules and cutting off people from their customers, that's going to be hard for them to operate. So, well, thank you for that background on farming. Last word I want to say to end on a positive note on farming. I mentioned Northeast, the grape pickers. This is the time of year to take a drive through Northeast with your windows down and to smell the grapes. I can remember when I played soccer in high school, we had a fall season, and to go play a game out on the field at St. Mary's Seminary, which is right next to the grape field, nothing like getting off that bus and then smelling the grapes and just and having it all surround you. So, yeah, it's definitely an integral part of our of our community. So thank you for that. Let's talk about now education. In episode number 2 of October Surprise, we talked with Jerry Mifsud, a longtime administrator in the Erie School District, and he gave his perspective on the challenges that inner city districts in PA 16 are facing, notably the Erie School District. So, Judy, you were a longtime teacher, as we mentioned at the outset, 35 and a half years at Lakeview High School in Mercer County. You've alluded to earlier that it was a rural district, that a lot of your students were farmers. So I'm interested to compare and contrast the challenges in a more rural education compared to the inner city. So can you help me understand, can you help our listeners understand, what are the biggest challenges that are facing everybody, teachers, students, and school districts in Mercer and the surrounding area? What are the big challenges?
Well, having said that, I taught for 35 and a half years. I will have to tell you, I come from a family of 6, and 5 of us were teachers.
Okay.
And I have a twin sister that is still teaching right in the Mercer School District. And the challenges for us at this point in time in rural districts are monumental. A lot of the problems that come to our district are, a lot of times people say, oh, teachers just want to ask for more funding.
Right.
But when you look deeper into it, we have social problems that are hurting our districts. A lot of them are economic. Because of people not having jobs, because of families having to work 2 and 3 jobs, the children are suffering. Our kids when they come home, a lot of times they're taken to a drop-off daycare center because mom or dad are still at work, and then mom and dad have to pick them up at 6:30 or 7 in the evening, and then or take them to someone else's house, and then that whole there's that whole segment of coming home, sitting down around the kitchen table, getting the homework done. It doesn't happen because the families are working. It's not that they don't care for their children.
Right.
It's not that they don't love their children. It's not that they don't want to do the right thing. They've got to first put bread on the table and feed them. And so that is a big challenge for us here. Probably not that much different than inner city.
Yep.
Secondly, we have an opioid problem, and people may not think that little teeny rural areas have the opioid problem. We have an enormous opioid problem in our rural area. Opioids and meth labs are taking over our young people. And I will tell you, I guess this is connected with farming, but we had, and it again breaks my heart, a family that had a farm, and they couldn't make money on the farm, and so they made money on meth labs.
Jeez.
And they ended up, it's frightening. And they did it, and the young man was wonderful. Oh, this young man, I loved him. He was one of my helpers, my daily helpers that would come in and help me with gym equipment. And he said, when he got arrested, he came to me, and he said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Hines, but I had to feed my family. I had to take care of my boy. That's heartbreaking. So those are some challenges that we are facing. Along with that, we have many other challenges when it comes to technology. We have to realize that we are now no longer competing with just area schools. We are competing globally.
Right.
So the technological advances that have made it possible for employers to draw from workforce around the world. So today we need to bring our rural schools up to this type of technology. And the skill levels are much more advanced to meet, and the competition is higher, and this puts significant pressure on our teachers, students, and school districts.
Yeah, no, that's true. The world is getting flat, and so the job market is getting flat. And maybe that noise was just your phone reminding you to mention the technology challenges.
That was it.
That are going on. It was electronically tapping you on the shoulder.
Okay, don't forget about this.
Yeah. So it sounds like the first thing is that you're mentioning is that there is just a greater economic problem with low wages, that a lot of time ties into what's the minimum wage, what's the going rate that forces parents to work 2 and 3 jobs. And all of us look back with rose-colored glasses and think, oh, no, I came home and did all my homework all on my own. I didn't need my parents pushing me. But the reality is it's not just the teacher's responsibility to educate kids. There's I shouldn't say 1-2 punch, but I can't think of anything better at this point. But the teachers have to do something, and the parents have to play a role backing up the kids. And that's what you're saying is kind of causing a problem in the area. Is that what you're saying?
It's the security of a child coming into their nest. They come home, and there's an environment there that people aren't thinking constantly of, well, I got to get to my next job. Oh, Mom's not here yet because she's still working the late shift. So that security of just, and it's yesterday. Those days are gone, but that is creating a new set of problems and challenges for teachers, for districts, and for families. And so a lot of schools in our area are going to after-school programs because they know how difficult it is. And I will speak to early childhood education, the importance of that. We do have Head Start, but that's on our Head Start is always related to and tied to economics and finances. To be able to get into Head Start, it deals with families at risk or families with lower income. But the reality is, it shouldn't be tied to that, because there are families now that their income might be above that acceptance for Head Start, but they are still just as involved in getting from job to job, and their child needs that early childhood education. They need that, and I feel that is a challenge for our politicians to meet, to have pre-education for all children. All children should have preschool in a environment where you have teachers, an environment where you have certified teachers to get these kids an early start to be able to move forward in our global world.
Yeah, so I had a coach who would say if it starts right, it finishes right, and it seems like if you give kids that head start, give them an early start and start training them, that's going to help them down the road. It also seems like from what you're saying is where schools used to only be responsible for kids showing up at 8 and leaving at 3 and all that in between, schools now have a much bigger burden because they have to be sometimes more of that social fabric that the family used to provide. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Like there's way more services that schools need to offer, so they can't have the same level of funding that they had, maybe 20, 30 years ago. It's got to be expanded, or else these kids are going to fall through the cracks. Is that what you're saying?
You're spot on. You are spot on. That's it exactly. The schools have expanded to be a social service, not only educationally, but socially, a social service. And in helping, and I'm not saying that families are not, don't misunderstand me, it's not that families are not caring. Families cannot do what they used to do because of the economics in our area.
Right.
So we have to be an extension and to help more.
Right, because somebody's got to stand up for them, where if these other kids are, if the parents are having to work two jobs in order to put, like you said, food on the table, somebody's got to be there to support the kids.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. This is tying in with the school privatization. So this summer, Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, she toured an Erie public school with Mike Kelly. And so DeVos is controversial is probably a nice way of saying it in the education circles, in part because she's a proponent of steering money away from public schools and to privately owned facilities instead. And this is what Mike Kelly tweeted the morning of Betsy DeVos's visit. Quote, "Later today I'll have the extraordinary honor of welcoming Betsy DeVos to Erie, PA to visit Piper Burley Elementary School. Secretary DeVos has been working hard to improve our education system for every student in America. This is a very exciting day for our community." So I'm guessing you don't share his sentiments, you don't share his enthusiasm. What is this whole school privatization thing that DeVos and the administration and Mike Kelly are supporting? What is the issue with that that you see?
Well, I see many, but I will first say what a ruse that is for him to say that when she has been an advocate of vouchers, an advocate of charter schools, which bleed money from the public schools. They bleed money from the public schools. And when Betsy DeVos came to Erie, it's apparent that Mike Kelly supports Betsy DeVos. He brought her on his arm, saying how excited public schools should be when everyone knows that Erie is losing millions of dollars because of the expansion of charter schools and vouchers. So for him to use those words, it just is a slap in the face to every public school teacher, every public school administrator, and every person that sends their children to public school. But not only do vouchers and promotion of charter schools bleed money from our public schools, but I see another thing that's happening here, and it is divisive. What it is a separation of class. What it is doing is separating children where in charter schools and private schools and privatization of schools, they can close that door to anybody. Our public schools, the door is open. It says public right above our entrance. And every single child has been afforded the wonderful, wonderful ability of walking in there and getting the best education that they could get. When it's a charter school or privatized, that door is closed. So I see it as also a way of dividing us as a country. I feel that our public schools are the true melting pot. Our public schools, when you think of it, it is the very first place that you go, that you get to meet people from all different races, creeds, religions, and beliefs. And when you have a classroom teacher, when those children come in, she doesn't look at them as, well, your father is a doctor, or your father is the head of this ecumenical council, or your father is on welfare, or your mother, or your mom is a single mom. They never carry any of those when those children come in. They look at every single child as a brand new shiny penny, and their job is to awaken them to be educated. In these schools, there are stipulations that are put on that you cannot come into these schools unless you have this, this, and this. Or they close the door. If your child has problems with attention, if your child has severe learning disabilities, they're too difficult for us to handle. Let's send them to a different place.
Right.
That doesn't happen in a public school.
Right.
So I see it as breaking down the fabric of accepting others, the fabric of what we were made of, a united nation, United States. It may sound pretty strong to say that, and it may sound pretty emotional, but I will say that I have seen it. I have seen children from all different races, creeds, religions, and family backgrounds come in, and they all are one. And that helps them as they go out into the world and have to really work with all different personalities and all different people. Yep. This helps them maneuver through society, and they are more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. I never really thought of public schools as a melting pot, but I think of my younger brother's experience. He went to Fairview and played on the football team, played on the basketball team, and so he ended up becoming friends with a black kid who lived in a trailer park. He became friends with a kid whose both parents were school teachers, a kid whose parents were, or one parent was a doctor as well, two kids on the football team that they were farmers. I think one kid's literal last name was Farmer, and his parents were farmers. I mean, so all these different walks of life, like you said, that you wouldn't have crossed paths with otherwise. So it's interesting. I've never heard anybody talk about public schools as a melting pot, but yeah, that's where we end up learning about other people and then not fearing other people, because you're forced to spend time with people who are different than you, and you realize you have a lot more in common than what you thought maybe otherwise.
I like the words you use, not fearing, because that's what's happening, sad to say. There are walls being built of fear because they are not like you. In public education, you don't have, not one of those walls are built. There is no one that puts a stipulation, well, this person is not like you. We have children, as you said, from all walks of life. In the school I taught in, we had Amish children come to our school because of their special needs, and I taught adaptive physical education. I had Amish children that had, the one little girl, I'll never forget her, she had a palsy condition and had to have strengthening. She came just for gym class. And when she would come, that was the only time she was allowed to remove her little bonnet. And I'll never forget the one of my students, they were in first grade, and when she took her bonnet off, she had beautiful braids wrapped all around her head. And he went over and he touched her head, and he said, "You have the most beautiful design on your head that I've ever seen." And this was like first grade. Yeah. And this is where they learn acceptance. So I see the privatization of schools as divisive for our country.
Got it. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that perspective. My last question for you, Judy, is also about education. And so I know you're supporting Ron DiNicola for Congress. What are some of the things that he's done or that he is planning to do that you like? I know he was a big booster of pre-K for PA and a lot of efforts there. I'm guessing that's one of the things. What are the reasons why you're supporting him from an education standpoint?
That's the major reason. That I am sold. Anybody that is a proponent of pre-K is a person that understands the need of these little children that are sponges at this time of their life. And so that is, anyone that promotes pre-K has my vote, because that is going to launch these children off onto a world of success when they start early. As you said about your coach.
Yeah.
You start right, you end right. The other things that I know about Ron, just from talking to him and reading also, is that he believes in Erie public schools. He's raising his family there. And then tying this with the connection, he understands the connection between education and economics. He understands the families that are struggling financially because of what he did for the GE workers when they were laid off.
Yeah.
So he understands that if a family is struggling financially, that it's going to affect children educationally.
Yeah, it'll have a longer-term impact than just maybe what we're feeling here this year or the next year. So.
And not only does he promote early childhood education, he's working very, very hard with community colleges. He's working very hard to get a plan for Erie to have Erie County community colleges, which is so, so vital. Because not every child, and other forms of training, not every child is going to be able to go on to college. Years and years ago, again, back to rural communities, we had an ag department in our school. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but in our rural schools, we had an ag teacher.
Really?
We had garages that had tractors in them, and they would learn how to work on a tractor, learn all about the parts of a tractor, learn about crop rotation, learn about the newest, most innovative ways of planting. Yeah, we had an ag teacher.
I was going to say I grew up near Glenwood Elementary, and that's where I went to kindergarten, and that's on Peach Street here in Erie, one of the main drags. There were no tractors and garages there. I can tell you that from the year that I went. No, not at all.
So, and then getting back to Ron, he one of the things that by meeting him, he sits and listens intently to you. When you sit with him, he sits quietly and looks into your eyes when he talks to you and into your brain almost, listening to what you're saying, and then almost you can see his brain working on, gee, that was interesting on what she said. I wonder why she said that, and I wonder what's going to come next. Instead of, and I had the opportunity to sit down with Mike Kelly. In fact, it was probably one of the last meetings that he had in Mercer County that he allowed 6 or 7 of us to come into his office and talk to him. So I guess it was sort of a town hall. In an essence, there were only about 6 or 7 of us. And he'd ask us a question. And as we were talking and pouring our hearts out about education and the economy, you could see that he was looking over our heads and thinking of the next question or what he wanted to say to prove a point. Ron doesn't do that.
Yeah.
When you sit and talk to him, you know that he's listening. And he wants to hear what you have to say. And he's a problem solver. You can hear him thinking, oh, I didn't realize this was a problem here. Gee, what? In his mind, he's thinking, what can I do to solve this?
Yeah.
I also know because I have friends in Erie, and I've gone to Erie often, and my husband went to college there at Barron, and so I've been to Erie a lot, and I didn't know Ron personally, but when we went in the 60s and 70s, his name would come up with community work. You would see his name, or you would read in the Erie paper that he would do something. So he's not just just doesn't do things during a political campaign. He's been engaged with the community since, and I will say the 60s. That's when my husband went to school there.
Yeah,
so this is the kind of representation we need in Washington.
Yeah, this isn't
someone
just community engagement the months leading up to a election or a re-election. It's a lot longer and deeper than that.
Oh my, and Ron has done that.
Well, Judy, thank you so much for your time today. On behalf of all of our listeners, thank you for educating us on the state of education in the Mercer County area and all of the Western PA rural area, and then also the issues that are impacting farmers. So thanks for your time today, and thank you for your volunteer spirit and all that you do involved in our community.
Well, you're welcome, Jim. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Great. Our podcast today is over, but there's still more that we need to do. As we talked about at the start, for democracy to work, we can't be bystanders. We have to participate. You can help by sharing this episode with your family and at least one or two on-the-fence voters who live in our district, and then by voting on Election Day. Let's surprise the special interest groups, the political action committees, and the big money when we take back our district on Tuesday, November 6th, and once again put people first. I'm Jim Roddy. Thanks for listening to October Surprise.